The story begins at 8 in the morning in a forest reserve called Arvors National Park. A ranger named Benjamin Varney is at his post when the supervisor begins the morning round over the radio, confirming everyone's position. When it's his turn, the supervisor repeats the call several times, but Benjamin doesn't respond and seems very busy. He sticks a note on the postboard with the strange phrase, "I owe a body to this land." Then we meet the young Lennon, who is on her way to her new job as a forest ranger. On the radio, someone mentions the recent wave of disappearances in the parks and reserves in the area. Lennon stops the car to grab a tissue, and when she straightens back in the seat, there's an animal standing in the middle of the road. She seems mesmerized by its gaze for a few moments, and then the radio emits a shrill sound that irritates her, breaking the trance. Now the road is deserted again, and the animal has disappeared as instantly as it appeared. At the ranger station, Lennon overhears two colleagues gossiping about her hiring in a mocking tone. When Ranger Jackson introduces her, the two pretend that nothing happened and sneak away. Jackson congratulates Lennon on her new position and comments on the rumors that she has been trying to land it for years. She thanks him but remains distant from everyone, responding curtly every time. In the first briefing, Instructor Jang warns that there are no cell towers in the park, and some areas even lack electricity. However, Lennon seems more interested in the missing persons posters, one of which is Benjamin Varney's. The news of Lennon's new job also delights a couple of acquaintances, Harold and Margaret Finley. Despite their age, they mention that they are planning to go camping soon, as Harold had knee surgery and his doctor has cleared him for that kind of adventure. Finally, it's time for Lennon to take one of the posts, and it appears to be Benjamin's old post. The sinister note is no longer hanging, and with satisfaction, Lennon pulls the tape covering the forest ranger's sign. The facilities are modest, but they are all she needs, and Lennon soon begins to organize her things around there, taking care to secure her weapon properly. Only when she extends a map on the wall do we discover her true objective: to investigate the mysterious disappearances. Her motives seem personal, as she also hangs a photo of herself with her family on the map. As she lies down on the bed, she notices that the previous rangers left their mark on the wood of the desk, and we see that one of the names is Varney. At 8 o'clock, the morning round calls Station 114, and Lennon responds promptly, informing that she will patrol the Black Mountain area. A paper on the postboard warns that the ranger at this post will be out for 3 days and asks that no one steals their provisions, as it is what she has to last the whole summer. Lennon then begins her hike, listening to that same radio program discussing the mystery of the forest. They say it's common for disappearances to occur near granite fields, and the largest number of cases is in Arvores National Park. It also has the record number of cases per year, with most victims being children. Among the strange details of the phenomenon is the fact that bodies often appear without shoes and in locations that have already been checked by the rescue. Lennon spends the day listening to these reports and then camps in the woods at night, resuming the trail early the next morning. During the morning round, she tries to respond when they call Station 114, but the radio starts to fizzle, and she discovers that she forgot to bring extra batteries to replace them. With not much to do about it, she continues exploring the area all day long. It's already quite dark when Lennon starts to hear footsteps around her, and the beam of the flashlight illuminates that same animal she saw on the road. A very high-pitched noise suddenly comes from the radio, but she can't understand anything or respond. Only then does she remember that she didn't replace the batteries, so it's impossible for the device to be working. As she hears the footsteps getting closer, she raises the lantern and sees that it's Ranger Jackson. He says he was worried when she didn't respond in the morning and offers his spare batteries for the radio, as well as inviting her for a moonlit snack. During the conversation, he tries to find out more about her, but Lennon doesn't like to give him an opening since she knows she has a reputation for being crazy. Changing the subject, Jackson says that every forest ranger in isolated posts tends to be a little crazy and asks if she has been sleeping well, as many suffer from insomnia on the job. The two camp side by side to sleep, and in the morning, Jackson offers his spare batteries for the radio again. He says that these devices are old and not reliable, but it's safer to have one on hand anyway. Each goes their separate ways, and Lennon returns to the shelter, so exhausted that she dozes off as soon as she lies down on the floor. In a mix of memory and dream, She sees herself playing with a little girl amidst very tall trees until a female voice with an urgent tone asks where her sister is. This causes the dream to end, and she wakes with a frustrated sigh, as if it wasn't the first time she had dreamed of this. That night, she marks Black Mountain on the map and sets off for the next area the following day, doing everything the same way as before. Thus, she covers various corners of the park, constantly marking on the map which parts have already been visited, but she never seems to find what she is looking for. The disturbing dream also never leaves her, always with the same trees and the same little girl. Until one day, feeling exhausted from yet another fruitless expedition, she turns off the light in the shelter and goes to sleep. A few hours later, a shadow appears on the thin wall, revealing stealthy movements of someone outside. Lennon doesn't see the shadow, but she wakes with a sensation that something is wrong and turns on the light. Suddenly, someone starts banging on the door hard, and a male voice calls for help. Lennon asks what happened, and he doesn't reply, but sounds increasingly frantic, speaking as if someone else is with him, pleading for her to open the door as quickly as possible. Knowing that this is part of her job, she has no choice but to offer help, and eventually opens the door. The man is completely terrified and grabs her arm, saying that there's no time to lose. Lennon explains she needs to at least put on her boots before helping him and convinces him to let go of her arm. However, this seems to destroy his hopes, and he begins to cry as he quickly pulls away. Concerned about the state he's in, she runs after him barefoot and alerts the control center that there's an incident. Shortly after, she gets startled by the man's scream calling for someone named Sarah and runs toward the voice, finally catching up with the unknown. In tears, he tells Lennon that his friend was right there, but now no one can find her. The next morning, a search team is already on site, and Zhang explains that the missing girl's name is Sarah Greenberg. The park has been divided into quadrants, and each will search a piece, but Jackson doesn't let Lennon join the team. He says someone needs to stay at the shelter in case she shows up on her own, even though he knows that is unlikely. Lennon herself says that the girl would have manifested if she were there because she wouldn't be able to ignore the helicopter. Jackson doesn't listen to these arguments and remains firm in his decision, but Lennon decides to disobey the order shortly afterwards. She leaves another note on the board with the same warning as before, and one more message for Sarah Greenberg in case she truly looks for that post. During the search, Lennon relives her childhood trauma, which was when her sister Jenny vanished in the forest and was never found. The resemblance is so vivid that Lennon even inadvertently screams Jenny's name once instead of calling for Sarah. After searching for the girl all day, she finds a fallen, stained piece of clothing. A few meters later, a person is standing in the woods, facing away from Lennon with arms stretched out in front. Lennon approaches and recognizes Sarah Greenberg, very dazed and full of wounds. She is looking down and mumbling nonsensical sounds, but seems to react when she hears her own name and then asks if Lennon is a real person. Despite having found Sarah, Lennon does not escape punishment for disobeying Jackson's orders. Zhang dismisses her from work at the reserve and tells her to stay at her post with no further expeditions until the end of the week, when the helicopter will come to pick her up. Lennon is forced to accept this decision, but feels wronged and can hardly hide her anger. Furthermore, since she has lost the job anyway, she decides to disobey Zhang's prohibition as soon as her foot is better. But instead of exploring the remaining areas of the map, for the first time she retraces a trail right in the stretch where she found Sarah. Even searching every rock on the path, she finds nothing noteworthy, and that clothing is no longer there. In the middle of the night, the radio suddenly starts to crackle, and Lennon just switches it off again, thinking it's defective. Unable to sleep, she leaves the tent with her flashlight and sees something moving quickly among the leaves, a few meters away. Trying to see what it is, she approaches and asks who's there. As no one responds, she continues to light the surroundings and hears heavy breathing nearby. Suddenly, she catches sight of what appears to be a person crawling in the underbrush and going to hide behind her tent. Lennon introduces herself as a forest ranger and says she can help if there's a problem. But when she goes around the tent, there's no one there. The sound of breathing begins to mix with the rustling foliage intensely, as if something is coming in that direction. Lennon gets scared and goes back inside the tent, trying to listen to what's happening outside. When a very large shadow suddenly appears right beside her, stretching out long fingers toward the tent, she grabs her revolver and warns that she is armed. The thing stands still for another moment and then walks away with heavy steps. Suddenly, Jackson calls her name on the radio and informs her that someone is lost nearby and needs help from the forest rangers. without realizing that Jackson doesn't even know where she is, as the agreement was to stay in the shelter as punishment. She responds that this person just passed by her. The radio starts crackling strangely again, alternating between distorted noises and Jackson's voice, but she can hear him telling her to go look for the person. Lennon obeys and maintains communication with Jackson, until suddenly she finds herself at the edge of a lake that's on the other side of the park, miles away from where she was just a minute ago. Not understanding how she got there, she tries to explain the situation to Jackson and gets even more confused by his response. Jackson says she is exactly where she should be, and then repeats the forest ranger's motto: "Leave nothing behind, take nothing away, cause nothing to die." Lennon shudders to realize that voice may not truly belong to Jackson and quickens her pace to return to the tent, but trips when she hears Jenny's voice on the radio. After another dream of the past, she wakes up dazed and sees that she is still at the lake. Through the radio, Jackson's voice repeats the motto once more and accuses Lennon of having taken something from its place. She doesn't see the person coming down from the tree behind her, but hears something and goes there, finding blood on the trunk. Suddenly, Sarah's figure appears in front of her just as she was when found and asks again if she is a real person. Lennon begins to break down and curls up on the ground, covering her face with her hands. Jenny appears for a brief moment and whispers a hint in her ear, telling her that she needs to return to the forest what she stole. Leaving the radio behind, she wanders aimlessly until she hears a couple talking and feels relieved to see that it's the Finleys camping. But, to her despair, they can't see or hear her, as if she were a ghost. To make matters worse, a copy of Lennon appears right after and fires the weapon at Margaret. Lennon runs away and crosses an area filled with missing persons posters, including Jenny's, but again she runs into the Finleys on the other side, and now Harold is eating his wife's entrails. No matter how much she runs from them, the couple always reappears, acting out variations of the same conversation until she can't take it anymore and points the gun at Margaret. She finally understands that the forest is asking for a sacrifice to compensate for her mistake of saving Sarah, as that's what she took from its place. Unable to pull the trigger, she lets the Finleys leave in peace, and then the radio reappears. Jackson's voice warns her that she has to return what she took, or else she will take Sarah's place and never come home. Lennon replies that she prefers that option, and the radio suddenly goes silent. Returning to the lake, she discovers a map buried in the sand with absurd instructions, but decides to follow them and finds herself back at the post, where she discovers Jenny's shoe. She hangs it at her waist and goes through the door, inexplicably entering the house where she spent her childhood, not far from the reserve. She relives the last day of Jenny before her disappearance when the two were playing together, and Lennon lost sight of her. Then she sees an old radio and listens to the conversation between Zhang and Jackson on the day Jenny disappeared. Zhang even found her, but tells Jackson that the girl wasn't lost and was instead taken by the forest. Moving through the other rooms, Lennon's house begins to transform to force her to follow a specific path and confront several horrors. Her mother's despair, a macabre funeral, and her father taking his own life. When the lights go out and a frightening shadow appears, Jenny's voice guides her sister to their room, which is filled with water. Lennon asks for forgiveness and swears that she never stopped looking for her, but the girl says it wasn't her fault. After Jenny suddenly disappears, Lennon leaves that room and comes face to face with Varney, shouting. The apparition also passes, and then Zhang appears in front of her. For some reason, Lennon knows that this is not exactly a vision and asks the instructor if she is a real person. Emotional, Zhang says yes and begins to explain reality to Lennon. She tells her that several forest rangers know that the forest takes some people and there's nothing that can be done about it, as nothing can be taken from its place. Despite this, she regrets abandoning Jenny and says she has given up many people over the years. Tired of it, Zhang affirms that she won't let the same happen to Lennon and promises to take her place, saying that the young woman will be a great forest ranger. Then, several hands grab Lennon by the shoulders and push her down. She emerges in the middle of the lake and sees Jenny on the shore for a moment, but it's actually just Jackson this time, the real one. He pulls her from the water and calls for help on the radio, warning that Ranger Station 114 was lost. Lennon asks him how he knew she was only lost instead of having been taken. Although he doesn't respond, he's not surprised by the question, and Lennon understands that Zhang told him the whole truth. The following summer, she is back at the park, and now it's Jackson who leads the instruction briefings since Zhang is missing. She really took Sarah's place so that Lennon wouldn't be taken and could keep her post at the Forest Service. Still at Station 114, she organizes her things the same way as before and hangs the same map, now with both Jenny's and Sarah's posters. At night, she leaves her own mark on the desk and claims the post for herself once and for all. Sometime later, she is camping when Jackson calls everyone on the radio, announcing that a boy has gone missing near Pear Lake. Lennon is nearby and responds to the call, saying she can help with the search. At the team base, copies of the boy's file are distributed, and his name is James Moore. Lennon receives a perimeter to cover and begins the search, shouting his name. After some time, she sees a person standing with their back to her, murmuring something. When he turns around, she recognizes James's face and grabs the radio to announce that she has found him. But then he asks if Lennon is a real person. She sees that he is one of the Forrest's chosen, like Jenny and Sarah. For this reason, she replies that she is not a real person, and the boy turns away again with a despondent look. Lennon puts the radio away without notifying anyone and walks away.